story of Jesus. So easy to explain. After they crucified him, a woman, she claimed his name. The story of Jesus. The whole Bible knows. Went all across the desert, and in the middle he found a rose. It's a little piece of a little song that I'm working on. Those of you who love Jimi Hendrix might know what that is. That is a part of the last thing that Jimi ever wrote. It's a poem that he wrote right before he died. And this is more than 50 years ago now. So let me just say, this is the gospel of rock. That's what I'm calling this this series, video series. And we're talking about rock music, what is now called classic rock, and we're doing, mainly it's like rock criticism, looking at mainly the lyrics of songs, but trying to go deeper and into the spirituality of this music. And starting with, we started with some basic questions, of can music save your mortal soul? The Don McLean American Pie questions. Let's just say this could be a very long video, actually, because this is such an interesting topic. I mean, Jimi Hendrix, he's a mystery. Where did he come from, and how did it all happen? How did he die so young? Did he know he was going to die? Did he even maybe want to die? Seems like he knew he was going to die, first of all. Maybe he was surrendered to the fact that he was probably going to die young, or that he was going to die young. Jim Morrison also famously knew he was going to die young. He told people, you're drinking with number 3. He would tell people, because he was the third after Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, then Jim Morrison, right? 27 Club, that's where we got the 27 Club. That Kurt Cobain is in that, and some others are also in that. But anyway, Jimi Hendrix wrote this incredible poem, which was probably a song, but he never made it into a song. But his girlfriend, who he was with the night he died, Monica Dannemann, German girl, who actually wrote this incredible book, The Inner World of Jimi Hendrix. I have it right here, with her story, if you believe it, and some really incredible artwork that she did, mainly of Jimi playing guitar. Very beautiful, incredible pieces of art that she did. And she includes the handwritten words of Jimi's last poem. So we have that. We actually have that. She saved it Now, people think that she was lying and that they don't completely trust her story of how Jimi died. Everyone seems to have had some stake in it, including her. Now, we're not going to go into the whole thing, and we're not going to talk about whether, I believe I believe that it would be wise to listen to her and to hear what she has to say. And she does say a lot of really great things about Jimi that I think really shed light on him as a person. And if anything, she's trying to show, he kind of had this image of being this wild man from Borneo or whatever, very sexual, was ladies' man who, had all these mistresses, and he would never, tie the knot because he was just a player in every sense of the word. And she tries to show that he wasn't really, he might have been that way early on to some extent, but he changed. And when he found her, this is where, people will become skeptical, that she claims that she was the one, that she was the sole love of his life, and that he wanted to marry her, or they did get married. In fact, in the beginning of this book, she has something from Jimi's dad, let's see what it is, that makes it seem as if she has some things that made it seem as if Jimi's family knew that about their relationship and knew that they were engaged to be married. Again, let's not go into that. Let's just go into Jimi's spirituality a little bit and what he wrote in this poem. And from what Monica says, he was just kind of in a trance when he wrote this. He was just like taken over, and he just wrote and wrote and wrote. And it is kind of a long poem. It's not that long, but it's long enough. Maybe she doesn't have the whole thing here. The story of Jesus, so easy to explain. After they crucified him, a woman, she claimed his name. The story of Jesus, the whole Bible knows, went all across the desert, and in the middle he found a rose. There should be no questions, there should be no lies. He was married ever happily after. For all the tears we cry, no use in arguing. All the use to the man that moans. When each man falls in battle, his soul, it has to roam. Angels of heaven, flying saucers to some, made Easter Sunday the home of the rising sun. Actually, it looks like he wrote the risening sun. The story is written by so many people who dared to lay down the truth to so very many who cared to carry the cross of Jesus and beyond. We will gild the light, this time with a woman in our arms. I don't know if he wrote gild the light there or guide the light. We as men can't explain the reason why the woman's always mentioned at the moment that we die. All we know is God is by our side, and he says the word so easy yet so hard. I wish not to be alone, so I must respect my other heart. Oh, the story of Jesus is the story of you and me. No use in feeling lonely. I am searching to be free. The story of life is quicker than the wink of an eye. The story of love is hello and goodbye until we meet again. Many people don't actually quote the rest of the song, the rest of the poem, they just quote that last part. The story of life is quicker than the wink of an eye. The story of love is hello and goodbye until we meet again. In fact, if you look at Jimi Hendrix quotes, that's a quote, that someone put, a bunch of people, I think, put online as one of his quotes. But they don't talk about the rest of the song, I think it's a song. If he had lived, he probably would have made it into a song. But as it is, it's a poem. Obviously, it has a rhyme scheme. It has verses. He seems to be talking about himself and Monica. She was right there in the room when he wrote this. And it seems to be saying, just to make a long story short, Jimi is Jesus. Jimi realized that he was the Christ, or he was Christ. And he was channeling this dictation, basically, or he was receiving this dictation that Jesus was married, and when he died, a woman claimed his name. Actually, that's what Monica did after Jimi died. She claimed his name, and Jesus went all across the desert, and he found the rose in the desert, which would be, for Jesus, it would be Mary, I guess. Although he doesn't mention Mary in this. But, the word marry, to get married. So Jimi seems to be saying, I'm getting married, and he has a realization. Might have been it might have just come right at the very end of his life, that the calling of the union of the male and the female together as one. For all the problems that there is for the institution of marriage, it's such a beautiful thing, really. It's a very high ideal, and I think Jimi is talking about it. He's I must respect my other heart, he says. It's the story of you and me. The story of Jesus is the story of you and me. Now, does he mean you and me, like him and Monica? Or does he mean Jesus' story is the story of all of us? Probably both, but he knows he's going to die. It seems very... In fact, Eric Burdon, Monica showed Eric Burdon this after Jimi died, and Eric Burdon thought that this was a suicide note. Like, it seems for sure that Jimi knows he's going to die. Like, how did he know he's going to die if he didn't commit suicide? Of course, it's very possible that he knew he was going to die that night. Maybe he did know he was going to die. Anyway, let's mention one other thing here. So much we could talk about. I mean, this is a whole video series in and of itself. Jimi Hendrix video series. Jimi Hendrix, by the way, I was born in 70. Jimi, from the moment I heard him, when I was 11 years old, he was a god. He was like, of course, he's up there with the greatest rock musicians ever, or any musician. And he did it all in like 3 years. Janis Joplin and Jim Morrison as well, it was just like 4 or 5 years. For Jimi, I think it was only like three, how many years was it? Well, I mean, it was a long time coming for him, but his rise to superstardom was like, very brief amount of time. Purple Haze. I didn't know about this until I looked at this book. And I haven't read the whole book. I'm sure there's a lot of really cool stuff in this, but I haven't read the whole thing yet. But the Purple Haze, she has the original Purple Haze. Handwritten Purple Haze. What does it say? Purple Haze, Jesus saves. And it was Purple Haze actually came out of a dream that Jimi had. And it was a very long poem that he wrote. I'll read you a little bit of it. And they shortened it for the radio to make it into a song that mainly young kids would listen to and would find cool, But it was more than that, it was a much deeper thing that, and most people think when they hear Purple Haze, first of all, they mishear it. Excuse me while I kiss this guy. And I think that Jimi actually played on that even while he was alive. He would sing that, excuse me while I kiss this guy, and then he'd go over to Noel Redding or something and kiss him or something like that. I'd like to see the video of that, but that's what I heard, is that he would actually sing it that way because that's what people thought it was. And then people thought it was a drug song, that he's talking about drugs, and it was some LSD trip. Purple Haze. Beyond insane. Is it pleasure or is it pain? Down on the ceiling, looking up at the bed. See my body painted blue and red. I see fetus unborns pointing at the time, rush through space. My hair is blowing in their minds. Through the haze, I see 1,000 crosses scratched in the blank, blank, blank. Now, I think what Monica wants to do is to resurrect the spiritual Jimi. The Jimi was super spiritual dude. And if you didn't already know it from his music, obviously, I think for anyone to be at that level, they'd have to be that. Personally, that's my feeling. That even if they're not spiritual, even if they deny it, they are. But Jimi had some connection with Jesus that he didn't talk about a whole lot, and I don't think that rock stars did, especially not at that time, because it would ruin their image to some extent, and I think they were being counseled not to talk about those things because they didn't want to lose the fans. The manager, apparently Jimi had a fairly corrupt manager that he was just about to get. This is where the whole story, maybe he was killed, maybe Jimi was killed by his manager. That's one theory. It's possible, but these guys were being counseled of what to say, what not to say, what to play and what not to play. And you never got to know who they really were. You just saw an image that was crafted for the audience to a certain degree, and who were they really behind the mask? And so Monica is presenting the side of Jimi that no one really saw, except when people met Jimi, they met a very gentle, like a gentleman. He was soft spoken. He was very articulate and funny, and all the things that really actually do come across in his music. But no one really got to understand what his connection with God and spirit. He actually does sing about it. He sings all about love and about But he doesn't talk about Jesus. He doesn't talk about, Christianity and his own religious understanding. That last poem, though, I really think he knew he was going to die. He didn't commit suicide, but he knew he was going to die, and he identified with Jesus. He identified with being one man with one woman. I think, from what he's saying there. Now, there might have been the other side of him that still was there, the womanizer. But from what Monica says, it wasn't really. There is a story about how, like the day that before or 1 or 2 days before Jimmy passed, she was like yelling at him out on the street. So there's a lot, that take everything with a grain of salt. I don't completely take what Monica says as the gospel truth. But I do think that it's worth paying attention to, for sure. And she does have that last poem, and the poem says something, I think if that really was coming from Jimmy's hand, and obviously it was, that says something. Anyway, thanks for listening. See you next time. The Gospel of Rock. Rock on.